Welcome everybody to the meeting of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel on the 12th of August 2019. The first item on the agenda is to appoint a chair and a vice chair for the ensuing year. Could I first therefore seek a nomination for chair?
I nominate Jill Howell, sorry. Too many Jills in the room.
Is that seconded? Seconded. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. The next nomination is for vice chair of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel. Is that seconded? All those in favour? Thank you. Therefore, Jill will take over the chair, and Councillor Colin Mann, can you please come to the podium?
I want a free transfer. Carry on the meeting, Jill. I'll be with you now.
We can watch you then, Colin. You know where you are.
Firstly, thank you very much for electing me Chair of Gwent Police and Crime Panel. My thanks to Councillor John Guy for all the work that he has done and for his very long service on Gwent Police and Crime Panel as Chair. We have a card actually circulating here today, so if anybody would like to sign that, we will make sure that it gets to John with our very best wishes. Thank you to Colin for accepting the position as Vice Chair as well. So today's meeting, first item on the agenda, these papers I've immediately lost. Okay. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest that need to be brought forward for today's meeting, please? No? Okay, moving on. Apologies for absence. Any apologies, Kath?
We had apology from Councillor Lisa Winnett and Councillor Peter Clark. There's also a sheet circulating for members to note any others.
We should give apologies for Darren Garwood.
Thank you all very much. Moving on then to the agenda. The minutes of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel held on the 29th of March 2019. So, accuracy first? Accuracy first, okay. Accuracy first, page 1, any comments? Page 2, 3, 4.
Chair, first of all, congratulations on your election of Chair. And to Colin as Deputy Chair. With your indulgence, I think you're doing matters rising at the same time. Item 7, will you agree if Sean could give an update on the complaints reform position?
Would that be the best?
Yeah.
Just a quick update that we informed you last time that we were doing some modelling of the different options for complaints reform, but we hadn't had any sort of notification about when it would come into action. We've now had a letter from the Home Office to say that the new system should be put in place by January or February next year, depending on when the secondary legislation goes through Parliament, which is likely to be sort of at the end of November, beginning of December. So we'll give you some more definite information about the new complaint system next time we meet.
Thank you very much. Page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, well, thank you for that update, Sean. And, sorry, so can somebody move the acceptance of the minutes? Thank you. And seconders? Thank you very much. Moving on then, next item on the agenda is the proposed appointment of the Chief Constable. Very pleased to have that come to today's meeting. So this is a meeting of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel. We welcome Ms Pam Kelly as the candidate. We welcome the Police and Crime Commissioner and his officers, and also Jill Lewis as the independent member on the panel. The meeting will first address the confirmation hearing, and once that's concluded, then the remainder of the agenda will follow for today. We will move around the table now as panel members and introduce ourselves as we go around. So, Yeah, we're going to ask everybody to introduce themselves now as they move around. So, Jill Howells, Chair of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel, and if we move to my left.
This time, oh, it is working. Sorry, Colin Mann, Vice Chair and Council in County Borough.
Peter Nuttall, co-opted member.
Councillor Jason Jordan, Newport City Council.
Councillor Will Routley, Newport City Council.
Sean Curley, Commissioner's Chief Executive.
Jeff Cuthbert, Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
And Larry Thomas, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Jill Lewis, the independent member for this process.
Pam Kelly, Temporary Chief Constable, Gwent Police.
Councillor Tony Easton, Monmouthshire County Council.
Councillor Chris Forhead, Caerphilly County Council.
Councillor Jez Kirby, Caerphilly County Borough Council.
Councillor Jonathan Millard, Blind Gwent.
Emma Rapier, Torvine County Borough Council.
Joanna Robinson, Head of Strategy Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Jordan Watkins, Policy and Research Assistant at the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Joanne Regan, Head of Assurance and Compliance for the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Emma Lionel, Finance Commissioner Manager at the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Communications Officer at the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Emily Tuesday, Communications for Gwent Police.
Gareth Noyes, Corporate Communications, Gwent Police.
Good morning, Inspector Shane Underwood, Staff Officer for Gwent Police.
Thank you all very much. The Police and Crime Panel have a statutory duty to hold a confirmation hearing and must confirm the professional competence and personal independence of the proposed candidate. The panel have a power to veto this appointment, but this is very rare and requires a 2/3 majority of the panel members to vote in favour. Following the meeting, the panel will write to the Commissioner to confirm their recommendations. I'd like now to hand over to the PCC to present your report.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I am pleased to propose Pam Kelly as my preferred candidate for Chief Constable. You will see from the report in front of you that I am confident that we have undertaken a robust, open and fair recruitment process. I was particularly encouraged that we had 3 candidates on this occasion, a positive outcome that is rarely matched or exceeded across policing. We followed the College of Policing's guidance on Chief Officer appointments, as well as the main interview process. The candidates took part in a stakeholder panel where they were questioned by key partners about their areas of work. The candidates' responses were all tested against the competencies and values within the College of Policing's framework. I was advised by Sean Curley and Darren Garwood in their statutory roles, and we benefited from having Judith Paget, Chief Executive of the 9/11 Health Board, and Mike Cunningham, Chief Executive of the College of Policing, on the panel too. We also had Jill Lewis, the independent member, who has provided us with her human resources expertise and has written the report at Appendix 4. Jill is here today and is happy to speak to her report and to take questions. Pam Kelly performed exceptionally well throughout the process, and this report provides evidence of how she meets the criteria required to undertake the role. So I very much hope that you will support me in confirming that Pam Kelly should be appointed, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may wish to put to me also.
Thank you very much for that, Commissioner. Temporary Chief Constable Pam Kelly, you can ask any procedural questions you may have before the panel's questioning gets underway, if you have any.
No questions at this stage, thank you.
Thank you very much. In that case, what we'll do is we'll open up the questions from the panel. One of my first questions is actually addressed to Jill Lewis, the independent member. Thank you for your time supporting the Gwent Police with this appointment. One of the issues you raised was about the ethnic diversity of the interview panel. I just wondered, could you tell us how you feel that this could be enhanced in the future?
Thank you, Chair. So, first of all, I think it's important to say that the ethnic diversity of the panel approximately represented the majority of the area. So I have no concerns that it in any way adversely influenced the outcome. I think it's important that we're clear on that. And typically in these processes, it can be very difficult to find a balance of ethnicity which also marries people's availability and people of sufficient seniority and expertise who are ready that day to be part of the panel. So whilst it might be possible to include a more varied ethnic background on the panel in a future process, what other forces have sometimes done, for example, is to try and include that in a stakeholder panel or in some other part of the process. So, but that would simply be an enhancement, icing on the cake, as it were, in order to make sure that you really felt that you had done as much as you possibly could in terms of diversity. But I would say again, it wouldn't have made any difference, I don't think, to the outcome in this process.
Thank you very much for that. Moving now for questions for the candidate. First question is Councillor Jason Jordan, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The Police and Crime Panel are responsible for the scrutiny of the Commissioner's Police and Crime Plan, and Gwent Police is an essential part of the delivery and implementation of the plan. Please, can you outline how you would ensure that the aims and objectives of the plan are embedded into operational policy? Sorry, policing.
Okay, well, first of all, in terms of the Police and Crime Plan, what's really important is that it has actually been refreshed lately. So, of course, in terms of crime prevention, which is obviously as part of that plan, supporting victims, of course, then in terms of community cohesion, of course, in terms of reducing antisocial behaviour and making sure that we run an effective policing service. Those are the 5 pillars, the core pillars of the Police and Crime Plan. As part of the refresh, of course, quite rightly, the Commissioner and his team has looked at cybercrime and serious organised crime, all really important matters impacting on all police forces, including Gwent Police at this moment in time. So as we actually look at each of those pillars, as you know, Jason, in terms of some of our crime prevention work and the performance report here today, we are doing an awful lot, but I think we need to evidence that better. So when you look at some of the work that we're doing in terms of supporting vulnerable victims with Connect Gwent, and of course when you look at what we're doing for victims of rape and sexual assault, there is a huge array of support there in terms of crime prevention, reducing repeat victims, and also making sure that victims are at the heart of everything that we do. What's really important for us going forward is, and I'm sure you would agree with me, is how we work together in terms of promoting community cohesion. And that's a key part of the Police and Crime Plan. And some of that is about how we police externally in our communities. And some of it is how we actually make sure that representation in the force actually represents the communities that we serve. So some of our proactive policing is very much about making sure that we target our hard-to-reach communities to make sure that they understand what we're trying to do and how we're going to build confidence in policing. Very recently, I've played a key role in recruiting an outreach worker to build some of our community cohesion work with young people. And that outreach worker isn't something that is just going to recruitment events or going into schools. It's a long-term plan in trying to help us build confidence with hard-to-reach communities. Coupling that with our neighbourhood policing style, which is all about, as many of you would see in the local press, which is all about getting into schools, speaking to communities, and trying to get young people on board with what we're trying to do, is hugely important. Young people from a whole array of communities. That must be our neighbourhood policing style and tone going forward. There has, in terms of point 4 of the Police and Crime Plan, antisocial behaviour, been some significant reductions in antisocial behaviour, as you would see in the report, in our performance report. But actually, there's been some changes in recording, so you will see a significant increase in public order offences. But actually, in terms of making sure that we understand communities and we record properly, I am comfortable and confident that in terms of antisocial behaviour reporting and public order reporting, that now more than ever, we have our recording right. So a recent HMI inspection of crime data integrity showed that we were 90% plus in terms of our accuracy in reporting. That is significantly there's a significant improvement on where we were before. One of my primary roles as Chief Constable, as well as making sure that we deliver the best service possible to our communities, and of course supporting victims. One of my primary roles is to make sure that we run an effective police service. And to do that, it is about understanding our current demand, our resources, and of course our budget. But not just for today, but for the next 4 to 5 years ahead. So understanding our predictive demand so that we put our resources in the right place to provide the best service that we can for Gwent Police and of course for Gwent communities. And I've been doing that through our force management statement, which is about looking ahead and making sure that we understand our operating models going forward, understand where we can make savings, but also understand where we can invest in terms of public protection, vulnerability, which many of you will know we've needed to invest heavily in that. Some of our reporting and performance monitoring against the policing crime plan, in my view, needs to improve. And I think that's been a common factor in some of our discussions at this panel. We are en route in terms of improving that reporting, but I actually think we have a whole array of information, of great evidence that we need to be bringing to the panel to show what we and what I will do as Chief Constable to ensure that we meet the policing crime plan, but also beyond that in terms of serious organised crime and cybercrime as well.
Could I just clarify something? You mentioned understanding demand. I've heard the Commissioner's counterpart in South Wales, oh, not enough water, on the media a couple of times lately talking about the Cardiff model. Now, I must confess, I don't know whether or not Gwent uses that Cardiff model, and it's apparently targeted at hotspots and making sure patrols are, targeted in the right places. I don't know whether you could maybe spend a minute or two just explaining that.
Certainly. So Professor John Shepherd, who's known as Professor Data in terms of the media that you would have heard, is looking at how we approach things on a partnership level and understanding precision data. Now, we've actually invited Professor John Shepherd to come into Gwent Police to share some of his thinking with us so that we can work in partnership with, in particular, the Health Board. So we are moving towards something as similar as that, but of course we need to have the buy-in of other partners to help us support that. But what we do at the moment is that if there are, of course, crime patterns within our communities of Gwent, we make sure that local officers are briefed on those crime patterns. So, for example, if there's a pattern of burglaries or if there's a pattern of antisocial behaviour, they're not recorded individually. We respond to those hotspots to make sure that there's visible policing and, of course, a problem-solving approach to what we do. Although we don't apply the Cardiff model, what I'm proud of at the moment is that we have community hubs, multi-agency community hubs, emerging across all local authorities in Gwent. They are partnership hubs with health, fire service, ambulance, housing, and of course police, local police involved. So this is about partnership, working on the pavement, not just at a strategic level. So my hope is, with some of the work that Mr. Shepherd has done, that we can enhance some of the work that we are currently doing and make sure that the data is understood accurately so that we can deploy our resources accordingly.
Peter Nuttall next, please.
Implementation of change within an organisation can be challenging, as we talked about earlier. Can you tell us how you would approach this at Gwent Police?
Okay, so I've been privileged enough to be the Deputy Chief Constable of Gwent Police for the last 2 years, and before that worked for 23 years in David Powys Police. And certainly in the last 10 years, I would say, of my working career, I have been right in the middle of change, not just local force change, but working with other forces and partners across Wales, and of course working at a national level with colleagues across all 43 forces in England and Wales. The issue for us at the moment is, and I think this is the important element, we have governance clearly set up at Gwent Police. Our Service Improvement Board in particular is where we scope change, understand the impact of change, understand the cost of change, and of course understand the impact on our staff and of course our communities. So we manage that within that governance arena. The issue for us at the moment is that we have to be a very resilient organisation and we have to manage change very carefully. And I'll give you an example of that. At this moment in time, as we're working towards the policing vision of 2025, there are 15 programmes of digital work nationally being implemented across all forces in the UK. That, in terms of impact for communities, is enormous and will make a significant difference, especially in terms of interoperability across forces. That, in terms of how it lands with frontline staff, so that they understand those systems, so that they have the training and that they can use those systems to best effect, is challenging. So my role as Chief Constable is not just to look at the cost and not just to look at the impact. It's to make sure that our staff, who have an awful lot to do every day, understand what their role is in terms of managing change as well. So that I see as one of the biggest challenges for me. One of the things that I stand for is that I believe in innovation. So as part of change, for me, I think it's absolutely right and proper that Gwent Police are ahead of the game and innovative in terms of some of the change that we need to introduce. But we do that in a measured way so that our staff actually know what their expectations are and they don't feel cluttered as they're trying to influence change. One of the things that I have done and that I'm proud of is that at the heart of much of the change that I've been a part of in policing, it has had an impact in terms of community confidence and in supporting victims, in particular child abuse and victims of rape and sexual assault. So if you have seen my CV, I was one of the first police authors in terms of implementing change and writing the All Wales Child Protection Procedures. That's a partnership approach to managing child protection, and I was very proud to be a part of some of that. Also in terms of managing change for the future, where I see my role is lobbying Welsh Government, the Home Office, to make sure that policing has a strong voice and that the change is appropriate and not delayed. So much of my time over the years was that I was actually one of the pioneers who set up sexual assault referral centres in Wales. And that took an awful lot of lobbying of Welsh Government and the Home Office to provide us with money across Wales to implement sexual assault referral centres. So strategically, I have a responsibility to work with the other Chief Constables across England and Wales. Locally, I have a responsibility to make sure that our staff feel supported whilst that change is ongoing. And of course, in the middle of that, it's my role to influence change with political stakeholders and partners. And I will do that to the best of my ability whilst being the Chief Constable, hopefully, of Gwent Police.
Thank you very much. Moving on, Councillor Jez Kirby, next please.
You just told us about one of the things you stand for. How will you be the best leader for Gwent Police?
I think it's hugely important as a leader to first of all have your own values and be true to your own values. And for me that is always about caring, it is always about honesty, it's always about professionalism and integrity and really understanding your communities. So the first thing that I have and that I'm proud of are my policing values and my own values. The second thing in terms of leadership for me, and to be the best leader that I can, is that I've mentioned already that I care and that I innovate. But I think it's also important to deliver. And in my 25 years of policing, delivery and my track record of delivery, I think, speaks for itself. So also, I'm not just a strategic leader, I'm an operational leader. So I've been an operational police officer for more than 25 years. So for 4 years before joining the police, I was training to qualify as a teacher, and I trained as a secondary school teacher, but was also a special constable at that time. So I was a volunteer for policing. So this isn't just about having a job, this is about caring about communities and having a vocation. But throughout my policing career, I have worked as a senior investigating officer, investigating murder, manslaughter, serious organised crime, rape, sexual assault. And of course, I've worked as an operational uniform officer, as a strategic firearms officer, a public order commander, hostage negotiator. So leadership for me is about having credibility, and it is also about listening to our staff. So in the last 2 years that I've been at Gwent Police, we've made some really difficult decisions. difficult in terms of financial commitment, but I felt that they were operationally the right things to do. For example, reopening the custody suite at Ystrad Mynach, because I didn't feel it was right for officers to travel an hour each way with traffic to Newport to take detainees. From a value for money perspective, that might not look like the right thing to do, but from an operational policing perspective, and to make sure that officers are near to the communities that they serve, that was absolutely the right thing to do. And that is my role as a leader, to make sure that I understand and am passionate about frontline policing, because I am still a constable, and that is what I am. Even if I am promoted to Chief Constable, the word constable is firmly there. So my values, my care for my staff, my intention to be innovative and deliver for the communities of Gwent, but to also listen to make sure that we look after our staff who are delivering those services. And I hope that also my operational credibility will allow me to understand the situations that they face, which you hear on the media time and time again, in terms of officers being assaulted, in terms of officers having some really nasty injuries. For me as a leader, I need to be compassionate and make sure that they know that I support them and I value the work that they do for our communities.
Thank you very much. Can you explain how you will ensure that the communication is effective in Gwent Police and that the Commissioner's priorities, the performance measures and his successes are communicated throughout the whole organisation?
I think that is a hugely important question, and one that I know as a panel we've discussed time and time again. We do some great work at Gwent Police. I think we really get into our communities and listen to our communities and deliver some great work within our communities, but we don't actually share that more widely. So my plan is to make sure that we're already on this journey. We have already invested in a business review of our corporate communications centre. So that is about what do we need to make sure that we are effective in terms of our communication. So we will be increasing the establishment of our corporate communications department. We are looking at that, not just the digital policing element, social media, because we need to reach people by actually being outside Asda's, Morrison's, and chatting to people about the policing service and be visible in terms of our communication, not just through paper and social media format. So as part of that uplift, we are looking at what is the right fit for our corporate development, our corporate communications department. At this moment in time, we are looking at what other forces are doing so that we make sure that we become the best in class. And of course, I need to get the leadership right in that department. So we are now out for advert, and we're hoping, certainly there is a further interview on the 20th of this month to get the leadership right. It is an area that I would like to come back to this panel and talk about and to seek your views on going forward, because I think it's an area for us to improve on. And I see, as well as the police and crime plan, as well as my own people plan within Gwent Police, communications is certainly in the top 3 priorities in terms of what I need to deliver going forward, because that provides public confidence and reassurance for our communities. And I think there is a role for the Chief Constable to step into that space and to create that relationship with communities as well. And of course, that is something that I would look to do.
Thanks. We talked in there quite a lot about the social media, and we talked about how you're engaging with individuals in the community. But how are you going to make sure then that gets embedded into officers?
So we've got some plans in place around this. So we've already started training some of our community support officers in terms of what community reassurance and communications are. In terms of some of our senior officers, we're providing them with media training, because I think a lot of it is about confidence in stepping into that role. But I don't think it's just about communications at sort of media level and social media level. As you know, we've invested in extra chief superintendents to build relationships with key stakeholders in communities as well. So I want some of our key leaders to make sure that they attend town council meetings, local community meetings, and also I'm keen to make sure that as a Chief Constable, I actually have a roadshow approach, if you like, to going around to communities, hopefully sharing community space and inviting people to come and converse and ask questions of me as the Chief Constable of Gwent. So there's a physical presence, there's definitely some internal work that we need to do, but also making sure that at all levels in Gwent Police, we understand, and all of my staff understand, that communication is a key part of their role.
Next question then is, what should a Chief Constable be aware of to ensure that the operational decision making is appropriate and independent of the Police and Crime Commissioner?
I think this is a hugely important part of the Chief Constable's role. So I've already talked about my values. I've already talked about my experience and my background. The fundamental role for me is to make sure that operational policing is independent from any other political influence and or political individuals. My role in policing is to provide a service, an operational policing service for our communities. And I'm very clear on that. So for me, it is about being very well defined in terms of what our roles are. So the Police and Crime Commissioner's role, in terms of scrutiny, in terms of that budget element, and my role in terms of operational delivery. And ultimately, we will challenge one another, and that should be expected. And my awareness is that professional awareness that I will not be drawn into any political debate as a police leader. My role is without question, to stick to my oath and to stick to what I represent as a leader in policing. And that is to make sure that our communities are safe and that our operational policing delivers aside of any political influence. And already, of course, I've worked with Mr. Cuthbert over the last 2 years, and we have had disagreements in terms of what is right for operational delivery. But you work through those agreements, usually privately, so that you can work through them together. But of course, working in partnership wherever possible. And we have that partnership approach. But without question, I am very, very clear of my responsibilities to be independent and to be an operational leader and not a political leader in policing.
Thank you very much. I'll just pass over to Councillor Colin Mann now, who's got a couple of questions.
That confused me. How will you ensure that there are good working relationships with partners and stakeholders? I think you've covered a lot of this, so don't unnecessarily go over things you have done.
Some of the areas that I feel we need to improve on in Gwent Police are around prevention and making sure that we're very clear about what our prevention strategy is. And that is in particular around serious organised crime. You would have heard of county lines on the news this morning and how it's spilling from cities into smaller communities. So for me, prevention and partnership working go hand in hand. And we're already doing an awful lot of this. You would have seen, certainly in Newport, around serious organised crime, where we've actually worked with over 400 partners, brought them in to talk about serious violence and serious organised crime, gang crime, and the like. So partnership working is absolutely critical. For me, it's about making sure, as I've already mentioned, we can chat about partnership at an executive level all day long. And we do this really well around child protection, around missing people, around managing sex offenders in the community. We do it very well in those vulnerability areas, which are so important to get right. Where I would like to go, and what I'm certainly hoping our community hubs that I've just spoken to you about will take us, is that partnership working needs to be on the pavement. So a local police constable, a local police sergeant needs to have a small problem-solving group with partners that they can talk about emerging issues. We shouldn't be waiting for issues to get out of hand before we deal with them. Prevention is absolutely better than cure. And with some of the demand challenges that we have now and in the future for policing, I think that prevention agenda with partners is more important than ever. Where I'd like to go, and I see my role as a Chief Constable, I have a great relationship with partners here at Gwent in terms of the Health Board and all local authority leads. Where I'd like to go is that we have a clear partnership plan. So in terms of multi-agency safeguarding hubs to make sure that our children are kept safe, and we absolutely prioritise that we have a plan in terms of what we want to achieve together over the next 2 to 3 years. And that for me is the role of the Chief Constable. It's not just reacting to demand, it is about trying to prevent the demand from happening in the first place. And I see my role as Chief Constable with the great partnership that already happens in Gwent. I think we're privileged in Gwent to have partnership working where we can pick the phone up to people at any time. I was last night on the telephone to a leader of one of the councils. You know, that is superb that we have those relationships. But what we need to do is make sure that we have a clear plan. And I see my role as Chief Constable, not just understanding my own demand, my own resources and my own budget, but looking at how we can couple some of that work in to really target the prevention agenda, which I feel very passionate about.
Jumping around a bit here. Yeah, the Gwent Police and Crime Panel are responsible for approving the Commissioner's Council Tax Precept. As Chief Constable, you would be accountable for the use of those public finances to provide services. How can you show value for money for the people of Gwent?
So we talk about finances in public service, and all of you know that is a significant challenge for all public services. So first of all, where are we as Gwent Police at the moment? So as it stands, we don't know, because it's a fast-moving agenda at the moment because of some of the changes in political discussions. But where we are at this moment in time is that we may need to find £3 million next year, or certainly 4 million the year after. Of course, the comprehensive spending review has not been determined as yet, and the funding formula has not yet been determined. And there are lots of other issues, including the current Prime Minister's suggestion of extra police officers, which is a really great opportunity for us. But of course, we need to know what that looks like in terms of money. So moving on to 2022-2023, as it stands at the moment, if some of those funding formulas don't change, at point of 2023, the precept will actually pay more towards policing than the Home Office grant. And I think that's going to be really interesting for us in terms of some of our local decisions, because of course local people already have an absolute significant stakeholder in policing. We cannot be all things to all people, but I think that's why the communications that we've talked about is really important for us to understand the priorities of local people. So I think it's going to be a really difficult time for us over the next 3 to 4 years, because hopefully if those opportunities in terms of extra police officers come along over the next 2 to 3 years, that will be significantly important for us. But let's not forget what we've already invested in. We've already got additional officers here in Gwent, which has come from the local precept, and some of the decisions that have already been made. I see it as quite challenging for us. I think there will need to be local debate about finances, and we will need to look at what that tipping point brings in terms of potentially the precept providing more of the grant than the actual central grant. But I think we have a long way to go this year. And what I'm trying to do is to make sure that from an operational delivery point of view, that we put our resources where the most need is. So if we look, for example, at public protection, if we look at some of our supervision models, and if we look at making sure that proactive policing and preventative policing is a priority for us, I think putting our resources in those areas is absolute value for money. But with caution, I raise some of the issues that have been flagged up in the value for money profiles. So our value for money profiles show that we have more resources in neighbourhood policing. Our value for money profiles also show that we have more resources and money put into the development of IT. And I'm actually very proud of that, because I want us to have a stern commitment to neighbourhood policing. And for us to be the organisation that I want us to be around innovation, we do need to invest in IT infrastructure so that we can be effective and efficient as an organisation. But the honesty is, we're in changing times, and those financial conversations need to be taking place locally in order for us to share some of those challenges that we will no doubt have in the future as we progress around the budget conversations. But the one thing that I do bring to the table is that I would very much want to be the Chief Constable for the next 5 years, because I think continuity in this role is absolutely important as these changing times are emerging. And so for me, I absolutely, if confirmed today, feel really committed to seeing this through and making sure that we take Gwent Police where it needs to be. In terms of the financial challenges, I think that leadership is going to be more important now than ever.
Thanks. Could I say the latter part of your answer was particularly welcome?
Councillor Bill Routley.
Thank you. This is particularly important to me given the circumstances I've recently been through over the last few months. There are challenges actually set out in your role description, and it clearly states in there the importance of public confidence and satisfaction for victims. The panel has previously highlighted these areas. Therefore, I and we would be therefore really keen to hear how you would intend to improve and to change this as Chief Constable.
Thank you for that question, because you're absolutely right to ask that question. So first of all, what have I already done? So recently we've set up a victims board. For me, if we can do everything, but if we haven't got the confidence of our communities and that people don't feel satisfied with the service that we deliver, then we're failing. So, but first of all, let's talk about the good news, because I think there is some good news to share. So our domestic abuse victims, and we've recently had appeal inspection by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Fire and Rescue Service, which they haven't published their report yet, but the feedback that we had was that some of the work that we've done to improve our response to vulnerability and in particular domestic abuse was a huge improvement in terms of where we were 2 years ago. Our victims of domestic abuse, and domestic abuse is something that I feel really passionate about addressing, over 90% of those victims are satisfied with the service that they got from Gwent Police. Our social media desk, which is something that we were cautious about introducing, but we actually had about 18,000 inquiries to that social media desk recently. Over 90% were satisfied with that progress. With some of the recent work that we've done around victim satisfaction, when we look at our response to crime, around between 68 and 80%, 79% rather than 80%, were satisfied with the overall service that they got from Gwent Police. So it's not all wrong, is the first issue. But where we are failing, and I feel I'm really unhappy about this, is that about 45% of our victims don't feel that they're updated on what's happening as part of the investigation and the conclusion of their crime. That cannot be right. So the victims board, for me, it's a horrible word to use, victims board, but it is about crime, and it is about making sure that we're updating those people that report crime. For me, is about making sure that the governance, the scrutiny is in place to make sure that people are under no miscomprehension, that supporting victims and making sure that people are updated is essential. So if I stand for anything in terms of my background around vulnerability, child protection, domestic abuse, rape and sexual assault, serious violence, absolutely supporting victims is essential. It's in the policing crime plan. For me as Chief Constable, the next year is absolutely critical in this, because it's my narrative is that we support victims. It's the Police and Crime Commissioner's narrative that we support victims. Our performance needs to reflect that. And over the next 12 months, I absolutely want to come to you as a panel and demonstrate that improvement in performance. But I think it's really important that we don't think that we understand that it's not all bad. There's some really good work happening, and I wouldn't want to undervalue the great work that some of our officers are doing. It's just we need to go that, not extra mile, extra 4 or 5 miles, to make sure that our victims know that we support them and that we update them when they've been in difficult circumstances, a victim of crime. We want them to be very clear about what investigation has happened and what the outcome of that crime has been.
Are you happy? Yeah, okay.
I look forward to the improvement plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And final question, Peter Nuttall, please.
During the next 12 months, what do you consider to be the main issues, apart from what you've just talked about, in Gwent that need to be addressed?
I think in terms of some of the strategic work that I've mentioned, that some of those issues are really important, because to manage change is really important for us to deliver the best service possible. And if I also see some of the important issues, it is about working with colleagues across Wales. It is in terms of other police forces and, of course, colleagues across the UK. Interoperability in terms of making sure that we work together to combat serious organised crime, county lines, serious violence. Really important that we work together across the UK, because criminals don't work between boundaries. So that's really, really important. The other side of things is that I totally understand where our workforce is at the moment. So what's really important for me is to develop a resilient organisation and to develop resilient people within that organisation. And for me, when we look at our skills for the workforce and some of our skills in the workforce, many of you will see that there are a lot of very young police officers out there at the moment. And so, of course, with some of the intakes that we have, very young people joining policing. Between 4 and 11 years, those people with 4 and 11 years service, we do not have a lot of them in policing because, of course, some of the voluntary exit schemes that have been run in the past, we have a gap in terms of skills of people between 4 and 11 years service. So some of the challenges that I have, and I think this is hugely linked to developing well-being as well within the organisation, is to make sure that people are competent, that they have the skills, not just initial learning. This is about continuous professional development to make sure that people have the skills to perform their role properly. And I strongly believe that that is linked to well-being. We all know if you're confident in your role, if you have the skills to perform your role and the tools to perform your role, you are confident and you feel good about your delivery and what you're doing. So we have an awful lot of work within the people plan that we have in draft ready to go about building resilience and building an organisation which is resilient, but understanding the workforce and the skills and the experience that we have. And to do that, we have to think outside the box. So we're looking at, retention policies. How can we retain people in the service when perhaps, they may be coming to the end of their service, but they have fantastic skills that we need for them to share with people. Right through to making sure that we build people's experience in digital policing and everything else. So all of that is something which for me is hugely important at this moment in time, because policing is no longer just about walking the beat, chatting to people and gathering intelligence. If I'm honest, those are the core issues of policing. But actually, police officers now need to be cyber aware. They need to understand what forced marriages looks like, what human trafficking look like. All of the issues that years ago we never used to chat about. Right through to cyberbullying, right through to fraud. All of these things are what a local bobby needs to be able to do. So skills, experience and confidence is absolutely important. The other issue that I feel is really important is around absence management. And I've put a whole structure around absence management, because there is no point in us recruiting, 100 plus officers when we have 100 officers off a day or 100 staff off a day. So, and in fairness, some of those staff are very ill, some of them have been assaulted on duty, and they deserve the utmost support from us. But also it's important that if there are staff that need to be in work, that we make sure that we're progressive in making sure that they're in work supporting their colleagues. So skills, capability, continuous professional development, and of course making sure that when people are in work, they're there to deliver the best service possible for communities is a priority for us. But also as a senior leader, my role is to look at the bigger picture and to make sure that we're working with other partners and other forces across the UK to make sure that counter-terrorism, some of the work, that we're doing around county lines, serious organised crime, are understood and addressed at a local level. Because we cannot think that we're a small Welsh community and these issues don't affect us. I want us to be alive, aware and responsive to what could be coming down the line.
Thank you very much. They were the questions that the panel had for you. Did anybody have any supplementaries before we close? Councillor Tony.
Yes, it's based on the last comment you made. I was going to ask the supplementary. You've answered most of the supplementary. But what we're seeing that for every 3 policemen you take on, one is leaving for whatever reason. And you seem to have in your mind what will seem to be a 5-year plan to increase the experience of the police coming in at the bottom. Should we get into a position where you need to take on a lot more policemen, would you have the resources at the top to provide that experience at the bottom? And how long would you think it would take for those young constables to be really proficient on the beat to carry out the duties, and off the beat as well, to carry out the duties which you've inferred in your last 10 or 15 minutes?
Okay, so that's a difficult question because, in fairness, people join at with different skills and abilities. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that there is a professional standard in policing. So the College of Policing, you might have heard, has brought in new entries into policing. So it's called the NPQF, the National Police Qualification Framework. So, and basically that is about making sure that across the UK, everybody is trained to the same standard in policing. And of course, that is the initial standard. What the challenges are is that, of course, if we need to bring in more students, what we have decided across Wales is that whatever happens in terms of an increase in recruits, that is the standard that we want people to have within policing and within Gwent Police, so that everybody at initial training has that same competence level. Now, you cannot beat experience, and whether in terms of investigative experience, in terms of tradecraft on the street. And that comes through coaching, mentoring, and being with people who share their experience with you. So what I'm trying to do, and we've talked about this quite recently, is to build in leadership training across the whole of Gwent Police. So this is about making sure that there's coaching and mentoring built in, self-awareness, understanding of their professional obligations, but also buddying with people who have the skills and experience to share with you. So have we got the right resources? For now we have, but we're looking at what our capability is if we need to increase our recruitment over the next 3 years. And we're doing that not just from a Gwent perspective, but an all Wales perspective, looking at what we can do together in terms of joint training. The biggie for me is not just the training, it's about the coaching, the mentoring and the leadership development, which is where my leadership comes in. But in terms of our capability to train more officers, you may know that we work really closely with South Wales Police in terms of using the same university and also the same classrooms, so that we're already trying to share skills and experience across forces to enhance people's development and to have that network. So it's a challenge, but we're certainly looking ahead to make sure we meet that challenge in Gwent Police. You cannot beat experience, which is why we are looking at how we retain people as well as how we recruit people.
Thank you very much. That's the questions from the panel. Thank you very much for your comprehensive answers to our questions. Is there any further information you would like to add, or any questions you would like to ask of the panel?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The panel will now take a short adjournment to consider the recommendation, and will reconvene shortly. Thank you very much. No problem. Thank you. Thank you all for returning. The meeting will now reconvene. The recommendation of the panel is that we confirm the appointment of Ms Pam Kelly as the Chief Constable. It's my pleasure to be able to make that announcement, and your passion and your credibility and commitment came through very strongly in your answers. I would just like to ask the panel to confirm that statement, please. Show of hands. Thank you very much and congratulations. Sorry,
Can I just say it was confirmed in the Observer last week, actually. That's the Caerphilly Observer.
Would you like to make any comment, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted, of course, that you have confirmed that Pam Kelly is now the Chief Constable of Gwent. It's been a lengthy process, and when we last met, we didn't know that her predecessor, Julian Williams, was within a few days going to inform me of his decision to retire. So we've had a process to go through. And by the way, I want to stress that I was again delighted that we attracted 3 excellent candidates for this post, which does put Gwent Police in a good light nationally. There's no doubt about that. And Mike Cunningham, the Chief Executive of the College of Policing, made that very point to me. Thank you very much for the serious consideration that you've given today and to the questions, which I thought were highly pertinent. And can I particularly thank Jill Lewis, our independent member on the interview panel, for her work, the report that she's written, and the expert advice and guidance that she provided to us to make sure we behaved in an objective and impartial manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've now concluded that matter. We'll be moving on to other items on the agenda. So if there are any members of the audience that wish to leave, please feel free to do so. Thank you. Okay, normal business now resumes then. So we're moving on to agenda item number 6, the overview of Gwent Police Performance 2018-19. Do you have anybody, Commissioner, that wishes to introduce this, or are you happy to pass it to the panel to take questions?
I would like to introduce it if I could, and then happily we'll take questions if that's all right with you, Chair. This report is to demonstrate my scrutiny and monitoring of Gwent Police's performance in 2018-19. While I acknowledge that there have been challenges around performance reporting in the past, I'm confident that the improved processes we have driven will improve the relevance and overall quality of the information we receive from Gwent Police. This in turn gives me greater reassurance and confidence in ensuring that the force provides a good service to the people of Gwent and that Gwent continues to be a safe place to work, live and visit. I am confident that this is the case. The report in front of you was originally produced for the June meeting, which is why some statistics may seem incomplete. And there are some updates that I will address in a few moments. However, overall, it is clear to me that our new performance monitoring processes are seeing significant improvements in how performance is monitored. That said, I know that more needs to be done. As you know, I have placed the force on an action plan over my concerns regarding performance reporting, and as a result of this, the acting Deputy Chief Constable, John Edwards, is leading on the development of a new performance framework. I'm confident that this framework, coupled with the additional outcomes from my action plan, will help achieve excellent practice. The panel members here today, particularly those who sit on the performance subgroup, have supported me in this journey, and I would like to thank them for helping my team and Gwent Police to refine our processes. As previously agreed, I have delivered an overview of performance for 2018-19. This provides you with a high-level understanding of Gwent Police's performance against my police and crime plan. A scrutiny performance document, included in today's papers as Appendix 1, provides greater detail and complements this overview. However, it is not anticipated that the paper of that size will be presented to each police and crime panel. This is a working document that my office and I use to understand how Gwent Police's performance aligns with each of my priorities, and this supports me in knowing where further scrutiny and information are required. And incidentally, from our inquiries, it appears that we're the only police force area in England and Wales that use this approach. However, this isn't my sole avenue of scrutinising force performance. My office and I attend many boards and meetings within Gwent Police's meeting structure where further scrutiny is undertaken. For example, coercive control meetings, operational efficiency and effectiveness board, the service improvement board, which was mentioned earlier, and critically, my strategy and performance board, where I publicly hold the Chief Constable to account. Also, of course, we have the Estate Strategy Board and Implementation Board, and, of course, the Joint Audit Committee that we attend. I also monitor the findings and recommendations of each HMIC FRS inspection. Combined, therefore, I am reassured that this holistic approach to scrutiny provides me with a good understanding of Gwent Police's organisational performance. Now, in terms of performance in 2018-19 and the report in front of you, I will briefly outline my view of the formal assurance provided to me by Gwent Police regarding performance against each of my priorities in the Police and Crime Plan. I have used a simple brag rating for each of my 5 priority areas. These assurances ratings reflect my interpretation of performance data provided to me by Gwent Police. Where I may deem priority ratings as insufficient, I believe the new performance framework will ensure better quality and relevant data, allowing for a more accurate picture of Gwent Police's performance to emerge. In essence, I believe that improved performance reporting will result in better outcomes being highlighted across service delivery. Both Gwent Police and my office are working towards achieving this. The first priority, crime prevention, is graded as amber. This is the first priority listed in my Police and Crime Plan and is an area of work where we are currently focusing scrutiny work. Crime prevention work by Gwent Police takes various forms, from prevention and intervention projects, such as the Newport Serious Organised Crime Pilot Project and Early Action Together, the ACES programme, to diversionary schemes such as the Women's Pathfinder and the Youth Offending Service. The Early Action Together and Newport SOC projects in particular are ambitious and forward-thinking pieces of work that have been recognised as best practice nationally. This gives me confidence that our intended outcomes will be delivered. We have crime prevention panels throughout Gwent, which are funded by my office, delivering advice and guidance in our communities. And these have grown by 5 just last year, with 14 groups currently active. There are also the activities carried out each and every day in our communities by CSOs and the neighbourhood policing teams. However, despite these successes, Gwent Police still need to improve how crime prevention activities is evidenced before I can be fully assured of the extent and effectiveness of that activity. Again, I expect that Gwent Police's new performance framework will address the evidential gaps in performance against this priority, which should give me sufficient assurance to rate this as green in future. Number 2, supporting victims, rated as amber. I have been clear with Gwent Police that victim satisfaction requires improvement, and indeed the Chief, during her answers to questions, made this very point herself. Following a 5% drop in overall victim satisfaction compared to last year, I am focusing attention on this area and seeking assurances that Gwent Police are improving the services needed to victims. I am optimistic that the new Victims Board will make progress in this area and I will monitor this closely. Can I say on this point that in terms of the information in the main performance report regarding repeat victims, there is a typo in the tables and on page 26, and it's not referring to percentages but rather to raw numbers. Gwent Police has, however, received positive feedback from HMIC FRS regarding their service to hate crimes victims. The force has also made considerable effort to improve services and outcomes related to domestic abuse, resulting in an 80% conviction rate, which is 4% higher than the national average. In July, HMIC FRS, and it's an incredibly long name, so I'll stick to initials, conducted a police effectiveness, efficiency and legitimacy inspection in Gwent. Although the official report, as the Chief has said, is yet to be published, I am pleased to note that the briefing I received from the inspectors is that they have recognised the improvements and additional investment we have made in the public protection unit as well as other areas, and this was partly paid for with the increase in council tax precept approved by you earlier this year. Community cohesion, AMBER. Gwent Police's Citizens in Policing strategy aims to encourage all communities to become involved in policing. Positive examples of volunteer schemes include Gwent Specials, the Cadets, the Headley Bach Mini Police and the Crime Prevention Panels, all of which my office actively supports. In terms of workforce representation, I have seen improvements in the recruitment of police officers and staff from across the protected characteristics, and as has been mentioned, Gwent Police now employs a positive action outreach worker who works with the BAME community in particular to promote positive messaging around policing. This is an encouraging step towards greater diversity, and I expect to see work around increasing representation in all areas continued further. However, I do remain concerned about high levels of staff absence. While Gwent Police has invested significantly in its well-being provision, this is yet to deliver the improvements required. Therefore, I believe more work will be needed in this area, and you will receive a presentation on this at the next meeting at the end of September. Tackling antisocial behaviour, rated AMBER. The overall number of ASB incidents fell by almost 7,000 in 18-19, but I know that improvements to crime reporting account in part for this drop, as many incidents have been recorded as public order offences. Nevertheless, the total number of public order offences in 18-19 increased by just over 3,000, which, when compared to the decrease of 7,000 ASB incidents, suggests that there has in fact been a real reduction in antisocial behaviour. Now, despite increases in 101 and 999 calls, Gwent Police has improved 101 answer rates and reduced abandoned calls. Based on recent figures provided to me by Gwent Police, the force has achieved an 81% answer rate from 101, with 57% of the calls answered in less than 60 seconds. I welcome these improvements, but expect work in this area to continue. Can I say again, there is a typo within the overview report, which we will have to take away and correct, where it states in that part dealing with 101 and 999 calls that there's been an increase of 250,000 calls. That is not a correct figure. We're quickly recalculating, and we will get that corrected and sent to you as soon as we can. I am also reassured by recent initiatives taken by Gwent Police to manage demand, such as the social media desk, which within the first quarter of activity received nearly 25,000 inbound messages. I am confident that this is resulting in a better service for residents, allowing people greater choice in how and when they interact with Gwent Police. Final priority, efficient and effective service delivery, rated green. HMIC FRS carried out a number of inspections of Gwent Police during 18-19 and praised the force for its approach in dealing with hate crime, domestic abuse, and its clear commitment to protecting vulnerable people. Since the completion of the performance overview provided today, we have received formal feedback from the Inspectorate, which I'm pleased to say recognises Gwent Police's efforts to improve how it manages risk to children and meets the continued increase in demand for child protection. As for the efficiency of Gwent Police, in the last financial year, the force delivered a balanced budget with a non-recurrent surplus of £100,000. The previous forecasted underspend was utilised to invest in enhanced body-worn cameras and taser capability. Therefore, and we will continue to monitor any likelihood of underspend robustly. And therefore, I am reassured that Gwent Police is delivering an efficient and effective service. So, in summary, as you can see, overall, I have rated the performance of 4 of my 5 priorities as amber. However, that is not to say that performance is poor. I have rated the priorities in this way due to the quality and relevance of data provided. I generally feel reassured on performance in these areas based on the meetings we attend and scrutiny my office and I undertake. Once Gwent Police's new performance framework is fully embedded, it will address the evidential gaps in performance against each of the priorities, and I would expect many of these to turn to green. Just on crime recording, if I could. One of the targets that I set at the start of my tenure as Police and Crime Commissioner was to reduce crime. However, recorded crime has increased. On the face of this could be deemed a negative. However, this has occurred for a number of reasons, most of which are actually positive and result from increased integrity of crime recording practices. In March 2017, the Home Office introduced new counting rules for crime recording. These rules led to an immediate increase of some crime types, for example, dwelling burglaries. In addition, there has been an increased focus on crime data integrity. Forces now record more of the reports made to them as crimes. Consequently, where previously there may have been recorded one crime, they now recognize instances where more than one crime has occurred. This could be illustrated, for example, by a domestic abuse victim report case. Although the victim may have contacted the police about one incident, if they then disclose historic crimes, these crimes would be recorded individually. This means that recorded crime will have gone up, even though the initial report concerned only one crime. And since the annual force performance report was created, see Appendix 2, which is provided by Gwent Police for information. I have received Gwent Police's force management statement, which is a newish requirement of the inspectorate in terms of forecasting future demands. And this helps to further demonstrate the difference between incidents and recorded crimes over time. It notes that there has been no significant change to overall incident numbers since 2014. In fact, compared to 17-18, the total number of incidents in 18-19 has fallen from 189,000 to 183,000. However, as I have stated, there has been an increase in recorded crime due to improvements in crime data integrity. So, to conclude, and I'll do this quickly, I believe that all the papers that you have in front of you will show that I am generally confident and reassured about the quality of services delivered by Gwent Police and within, of course, the resources available. The better identification of some incidents as crime has inevitably resulted in more recorded crime, even though the number of incidents has actually decreased. We are, of course, aware of the rise in cyber-related crime. Gwent Police need to do more to explain the actual impact of cyber in crime, given that there is no formal category of cybercrime. Incidentally, the table shown as 1.5 cybercrime by theme is incorrect, and we need to correct it in terms of the figures that are presented there. Now, I acknowledge that more needs to be done in terms of performance management. However, significant progress has been made, and I hope the panel will recognise and accept the improvements in terms of the documentation before us, which has come about through considerable work, both by my office and Gwent Police. And I want to thank again the performance subgroup of this body for their contribution. Finally, very finally, there are, of course, additional issues on the horizon. The extra 20,000 police officers that the Prime Minister has referred to, roughly our crude calculation would be 200 for Gwent. We don't know yet quite how that'll pan out, and we certainly don't know yet what the funding arrangements are going to be. The impact of a no-deal Brexit will cause problems for Gwent Police, as they will for policing in general. The work that the Chief outlined in terms of the police education and qualification framework, which is a national one, of particular issue for us in Wales, because we still have not got resolution on the issue of the apprenticeship framework. And of course, the very recent announcements on greater flexibility on stop and search for policing. These are matters that I will now have to discuss with the Chief Constable at an early opportunity. I know that's quite lengthy, but these are matters I wanted to reinforce. They may have dealt with some of the questions people had, but I'll be happy to take, together with my colleagues, any further questions that there may be.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction to the report. We'll start with Councillor Jonathan Millard with his question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for these reports. As a new member to the panel, I'll take this as my benchmark moving forward as my time here amongst you. You actually did raise most of the answers to the question, which was around the crime prevention in your first priority. And what you're doing as Commissioner to bring that together. So I'll leave that with you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mann.
Something which I believe has been raised before, Commissioner. Obviously the abandoned calls must impact on public confidence in the force. I was wondering, is there a system, or do you actually use a system where you know if somebody's abandoned a call whether or not they will actually call back again? I mean, I'm sure some of the abandoned calls are abandoned full stop, but I would like to think that maybe some people do call back. But it is a worry to see so many people are ringing off for whatever reason. You did mention that calls are now being answered quite often within 60 seconds, but legend has it, of course, and it's the bad experience that tends to go around, as you know. People still remember the time when it took a very long time to get an answer.
I don't know what's wrong with these today, all over the place. It is an issue because it does bug people. There's no doubt about that. And you're quite right that it's the bad experience that people remember will complain about. We rarely get people contacting us to say, hey, that was great, you answered it within a minute. It would be nice to get some comments like that because, as you can see, a large proportion now are answered within 1 minute. That's the 101 calls, which we have to remind ourselves, of course, is non-emergency calls. And if you think of other agencies and indeed private companies that you may ring for information, most people would accept a wait of much longer than 1 minute. Having said that, we continue to monitor it, and as does the force, and we seek to make improvements. I do need to make the point that it's not in any sense that people in the force control room are working slowly. That is not the case. They're working flat out and they're fully staffed. We're constantly updating their training to make sure they're aware of how to use all the latest technology as it comes along. That may be cold comfort to those who want to report something of concern, but it is matters that we will continue to, as I mentioned in my introduction, to monitor and develop further. On the issue of 999, I do need to make this point. 999 calls are not abandoned. They may be ended by the phone, the chap on the man or woman on the phone, because it'll be a BT operator that will pick up the call first and then divert it to us or the other emergency service. And sometimes people realize they've made mistakes and they don't want 999 at all, and then they may go. There are a number of reasons that we're looking into, but very important to understand, 999 calls are never abandoned except by the caller themselves. On that point, I don't know if the Chief wants to add anything.
So just in terms of 999 calls, they're always contacted back. So if somebody does ring 999 and then called off, they're always contacted back. It's more difficult for 101 because it's very difficult to get some of those numbers on the 101 system. But just to give you a reassurance in terms of end of July figures, there was a 10% abandonment rate, which is an improvement from 22% the month before. And how we've improved that is by actually making sure now we have extra people working at peak demand time. So we're actually managing our resources where we know there is peak demand, and we are seeing a significant improvement. So 101 calls that were abandoned, we're abandoning at 43 seconds in terms of July figures. So it's just showing that level of improvement. But 999 calls, we always contact people back.
Things obviously that has increased the number of calls is the availability of mobile phones, and do you actually monitor? You may get a dozen or several dozen calls about the same incident. That's factored in.
Very much so. If there's an incident on the M4, for example, we could have 30, 40 people dialing in at the same time. So yes, we do see increases when significant incidents happen.
Bill, you wanted to come in, Councillor Oatley, you wanted to come in as well, and then Councillor Jeremiah.
Yes, I like the new way of reporting. That's the first thing. So I like the traffic light system. You mentioned the robustness around the force regarding no deal Brexit. I hope this robustness is equally as strong with regards to no Brexit at all, because both ends of the spectrum are going to be divisive in the UK as public order becomes strained, and especially here in Gwent, as they are well divided. So I hope you're given as much emphasis on no Brexit as in no deal Brexit. Can you give me a reassurance on that, please?
I'll do my best, although the two scenarios will present different circumstances. But certainly in terms of potential public disorder, both scenarios could present issues for policing right across the UK. There's no doubt about that. What we do know, however, unfortunately, is that following the referendum, now 3 years ago, there was a spike in hate crime, unfortunately. That was a fact. It probably wouldn't have happened the other way round. But I do take your point that any significant change in publicly declared decision-making could provoke incidents at both ends of that spectrum. On the issue of a no deal, which would not apply in the event of no Brexit, there are issues for policing, because under no deal, it's not just an economic issue. There are major security and law enforcement issues involved as well. And for example, the European arrest warrant would no longer be available to us because it is part of the EU setup. And the whole issue of data sharing, which is crucial for modern day policing, would be in jeopardy. That's not to say that arrangements wouldn't be made through common sense, but they would have to be made quite separately. So no deal does hold certain specific issues for policing other than the issue of public disorder, which I know is the particular point that you've raised.
Thank you. Councillor Jeremiah. Councillor Jeremiah, can I ask, because that's getting into sort of operational matters, if you'd be happy to pass that on after the meeting and have appropriate conversations as need be? Okay, thank you. Moving on, Peter Nuttall, please, you had some questions.
We talked about county lines and the increase in organised crime throughout the country. On the youth side, it's reported that they're using youth to spread drugs, etc., because they don't get the same treatment. I note that the PCC has funded the Newport Serious Organised Crime and Early Intervention Youth projects.
Oh, yes.
With the Home Office, and are providing opportunities to pilot interventions targeting children who are involved in that. Is that just in Newport area, or is it not throughout Gwent? And as Chief Constable pointed out, crime it's not in one area, it's throughout. Should that not be considered for expanding?
Thank you very much. It could well be, but the particular project in Newport is a pilot that was funded by the Home Office for Newport. Not for Gwent as such. Obviously, Newport's within Gwent, so that's why Gwent Police have overall charge of it. But it is a Newport project, so that's the case there. You are, however, right to talk about the problem of county lines now spreading out right across Gwent. You may have heard broadcast this morning, and there's going to be further programmes on BBC tonight on the issue of county lines, where there is now clear evidence that the actual drug issues are moving out of the main conurbations into smaller towns and villages outside. We know the serious issues that there's been in Gwent with Operation Jewels, and I'm quite sure the Chief may wish to comment on this over the years, and it does seem that we could see this problem expanding across Gwent. But I can assure you that the issue of county lines and the impact on young people is well understood. It is a form of human trafficking. There's no doubt about that. Young people are very often, who may be particularly vulnerable, cajoled into doing this work and then are trapped within it for fear of serious violence. They may be attracted by the thought of good money, only to have their hopes dashed. So it is something that we give serious consideration to, but the particular Newport issue is because that's a Newport-focused pilot. I don't know if the Chief, if you want to. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, just to add that the Home Office pilot is focused in Newport, which is very much where the highest demand and the highest rates of incidence, in particular of children and young people becoming involved in the drug trade. I think your assessment is perhaps potentially some of the areas of vulnerability are about their particular safeguards that they may have in law, but I think it's more, I wouldn't want people to think that it's because of a different legal status for children, but because of their vulnerability to, and because of the business model that gangs particularly use to target our most vulnerable young people and getting them involved in serious and organised crime. What we've been fortunate, though, on the back of the serious and organised crime pilot for Newport, is to be able to secure some early intervention youth fund money from the Home Office, again with match funding from the PCC, to start to roll that out across other parts of Gwent to the other 4 local authority areas. So there is still a focus on Newport. We're still looking at that rollout and looking at where the demand figures are, but there are currently conversations, meetings happening with each of the local authority areas to look at how we can deliver that package of support, and that package in Newport provides high-end intervention through St Giles Trust, through Bernardo's, in relation to support for young people who are caught up in the drug trade and who are being exploited, but it also through Crime Stoppers and the Fear Fearless programme and our Positive Futures programmes, which run across the 5 authorities, has also an awareness raising element of work, working directly with young people in schools and through out of school activities through Newport Live to make them aware of the threats of serious and organised crime. So there's certainly those developments are in hand, and we're just at the point of appointing a coordinator to work alongside Inspector Paul Davis, who's the inspector in Newport leading on the SOC work, to cover the other local authority areas.
The other thing, looking at your figures, etc., the bureau figures, I sat in on a bureau panel 2 weeks ago, and the numbers are down, right? Which is a little strange because we've got the numbers down on the bureau, we've got the numbers down on referral panels as well, and the courts are low as well. So what's happening with the youth who are picked up? Where are they going? Are they just being cautioned and that's it, or not?
Certainly we can get back with specifics, but I think what we are seeing is that the numbers are much lower, and those who are coming through are at the more serious offences, so that you wouldn't expect that volume of young people to be coming through at the bureau process, because they are being picked up for lower level crimes. But actually those who are coming through the bureau process and who are coming through the youth offending services are actually with those with the more significant offences.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Eason, you had a couple of questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I had 3, but I think we thrashed out them about staffing. I think we know where we are with that. I was particularly concerned about victim satisfaction, which the Commissioner did touch on. There's been a reduction of 5% in over 2 years, although there was 60% or 80% reduction in actual number of respondents. I think that I'd like to see a wider form of survey on dropouts and things like that, which is through 101, most of them come through, and some go through 191. I don't think that table tells me a lot, and I think I'd like to see it expanded on in some other way. But my main question revolves around missing children. It's referred to in a couple of times in the report, but I'll take you to page 22 or 169, whichever you want to refer to. There were over 3,800 in 1718 and 3,700 in 1890, which is not a great reduction. But of those two figures, there seems to be a hardcore of about 500 repeat missing children. I'd like to understand what you really mean by missing child. How long would it be missing? What are the circumstances? Straight numbers don't tell me a lot, but are a lot of these children at risk and things like that? I'd like to see a bit more information on the depth of missing children.
I'll ask the Chief to deal with that. It is an operational matter.
I think this is quite complex, in all honesty, because every single child have their own complexities, whether they're a looked after child or otherwise. And certainly what we're seeing is, we are seeing a slight reduction, which is really positive compared to other areas, but the number of repeat children is very high. And of course, when children are missing, they're at the greatest risk in terms of sexual exploitation, county lines, and all of the other issues that we've talked about. All of those children that are within the repeat missing children bracket, there is a multi-agency approach around each of them. So it's not just a police-only response. And some of those children are from our own county, and some of them come in from other counties. And of course, when children are then housed locally, they go missing more frequently because ultimately they want to go home. In terms of reporting on this, I think it might well be worth, and we've talked about inviting panel members in, over a period perhaps in September, to really get into the detail around some of the issues that you're interested in, because we can certainly put some clear performance data together for you on this, but it would take an awful lot of resource time. I think the process and the understanding of what it defines a repeat missing child, and also what processes, multi-agency processes are around that, I think that would give you more reassurance than the data alone. But what reassurance we can tell you is that, in all honesty, the work that we do around missing children is hailed as very good practice here in Gwent. And most areas are seeing significant increases. We are seeing a plateau, which is, I think, a really strong indication of the grip that we've got around this area. But let's not make any bones about it. Every single missing child is a risk. Every single child that goes missing is a risk. And so that multi-agency approach is absolutely essential. So could I suggest, if that's okay with you, if you did want to come in during the September time and us look at you having a presentation on how missing children are dealt with, and then perhaps provided with more data in terms of what it means to be a repeat missing child. Some of these repeats are not just once or twice. Some of these children go missing perhaps 10, 11, 12 times over a period of a few months. So understanding the process, I think, is as important, if not more important, than understanding the data.
I just want to follow back on that. Yes, I was in Newport some 18 months or so ago, and there was a young girl outside one of the superstores, and it appears that she'd gone missing and she was begging on the streets. And this really, to me, is it a more Newport thing, or is it a thing across the county? And I noticed you mentioned county lines. Yes, I think that there are a lot of things in it. Yes, I'd like to be involved in some form of discussion to see where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mann has a...
What does DVPN and DVPO mean?
Yes. Yes, so as and when there is an incident of domestic abuse, a superintendent can provide authority for an individual to stay away from a victim. It's just to minimise the risk, really, and that then goes to a court, so that there is a period of time where an individual should not approach that victim. So they're domestic violence protection notices.
Thank you. Councillor Mann?
Yeah, it's touching on the previous point, but on page 169, I was struck by the fact that just 5 children per month account for around 16% of the incidents. Now, this may well be going back to the county lines that already been mentioned, but are we building on the work that was done by Jeff Farrer a few years ago? Hopefully, we've not gone backwards from that sort of work that's been done.
Absolutely building on that great work, in fairness. I think we were very lucky in Gwent Police to have the setup that we have, which has put us ahead of the curve. The important thing is that when you have repeat children, it's important that not just their own local partners are engaged, but the local authority areas where the children might have come from. So that's the issue here, where I think we need to improve, is getting our own local agencies involved is quite easy in terms of our own children. It's when people are coming in from another county over the bridge, as it were, and the communication isn't as good as it ought to be, is where it sometimes becomes more difficult. So that's the area for improvement in terms of missing children that we're looking at taking forward.
Thank you. Gwent Police, you've referred to as the 10th lowest crime rate out of the 43 forces. What's the comparative size of Gwent compared to those other 43 forces?
Oh, well, Gwent Police is a small force, and that's the crime rates. So it's per capita calculation based on 1,000. So it is proportionate. I hope that's helpful. I don't know. In terms of Gwent Police, it is a small force, and we do have what they call most similar forces. You see the letters MSF every now and then, so that when we make comparisons, it's with those of a similar size and makeup. Yeah.
Thank you. You referred to staff absence rates on page 70. You referred to the fact that they range from 30 to 47. Can you just clarify for me, 30 to 47, what? Is that days, shifts?
It's
numbers of staff.
It's number. Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Can I?
You're saying the right answer. I think we're all saying the same thing. It's the number of staff average per month.
Sorry, so just to clarify then, so on so the number of staff absent in any month has reduced from 47 to 30 by the end of the year.
Sorry, which page are you referring to?
Page 70, para 3 at the top.
Main performance report, not the overview.
Yeah, page 70 says staff absence remains consistently high with an average monthly absence ranging from 30 to 47 across the year.
Just for clarity, it relates to, so that narrative in the overall report relates to the graph on page 177 in the force performance report, which demonstrates the average rates of staff absences over the financial period of the year. So it goes from 33 staff absences a month to a higher level of 47, starts in the month of April at 33 and ends the financial year at 38. So it's showing the variation.
But the variation of what? The number of staff that are off at any one time, or the average length of their absence?
The average numbers of staff off during that month. And that graph and that narrative relates to staff, and there is a separate narrative, separate graph in relation to officers.
Okay, thanks. Because it's interesting that you've referred to the fact that there will be a sickness management report coming, because I think there is some differences in the way in which you can report it, and I think it would be helpful to have some clarity, particularly given headlines that we've seen previously that we've touched upon, particularly around the absence of officers with stress and that type of thing, and the sort of length of absence and the reason that they're absent. So obviously that's something that we can look forward to then in September. As an overall, how was the sickness absence of officers for 18-19 compared to the previous year? Have you seen a general increase, decrease, around the same?
We saw a very slight reduction 2 months ago, but it's starting to plateau. So we're not seeing significant improvements, but we're seeing plateauing and we're not seeing increases in sickness absence. Some of that reduction as well, we're targeting in readiness for the flu season. So we're actually trying to look ahead as well in terms of where we can intervene in terms of flu jabs and everything else for the winter months.
Thanks. I mean, for the report that comes in September, I think we've touched upon sickness a few times. It would be interesting to see officers and staff in comparison over the last couple of years, not so much of a focus on month by month, because that's operational, but from a strategic point of view, where are the problems, where are your issues with sickness, and how are you dealing with some of the issues, particularly around stress, where it's work-related stress?
Executive to comment.
Yeah. Just to reassure you that our office hasn't had sight of the forces annual report into absence management yet, but we have asked that demonstrates the comparison to the previous years.
Thanks for that. Under priority 5, covering efficient and effective service delivery, in the commentary earlier, you referred to the fact that we've achieved a balanced budget. That's not the only measure of having an effective and efficient service. Lots of services can run within their budgets and have varying levels of performance, shall we say. One of the key factors in your performance of the force would be in relation to staff. And one of the measures under here related to workforce, and it's a bit disappointing that there is no reference in, when you're talking about effective and efficient service delivery, around the staff's performance and the staff welfare, really.
Ask my deputy to comment on the latter part. In terms of one of the reasons why I referred to the balanced budget is because you'll be aware that, quite rightly, there were a lot of criticisms raised about underspends over previous years, and perhaps that's why we're a bit sensitive and wanting to highlight the fact that we have assured people that we'll be dealing with that robustly, and that was an example of that. Wasn't suggesting for 1 second that that was the only measure of force performance and efficiency.
No, I think just to provide additional reassurance is that the overview report is seeking to draw out the areas that we're critically concerned about and perhaps wanting to look at. And I think it's a helpful comment and observation to say that actually the effective and efficient service that Gwent Police provides is foremost provided by our staff, and notwithstanding the discussion around sickness absence, the very dedicated service that we get from all officers. So I think it is helpful as a commentary for us in how we draw out both the areas of critical importance that we want to address, as well as celebrating the achievements, which I think again relate to your comments previously around good communications.
Just to be clear, though, there is a measure that actually talks around the satisfaction of workforce. It's one of the key measures that you identify. So whilst we recognise that obviously all the forces linked into that, it was a measure around satisfaction.
I'd just ask Chief Executive to comment, because we did raise issues with the force over the staff surveys.
Yes, it was one of the things, because I think although it isn't in the covering report, it's in the framework where we were concerned that only 25% of staff had responded to the survey on this occasion. And I mean, the outcome was fairly static, I think, in relation to comparisons to previous year. But note the point of pulling it out for the overview next time. But I do believe it is in the, although I can't find it right now, it is in the actual framework itself.
So is that an area then you need to take focused action on? If you've only had a 25% return, I'm guessing that must be a significant reduction on the previous year. Is that something the Commissioner is going to look to take forward?
That's a fair point. We will look at that, and as I said, we did raise it, and the previous Chief Constable did point out to us that there was perhaps a little bit of survey exhaustion because staff had completed quite a few. That could well be the case, but it is something we need to focus on, because whilst 25% return might be statistically valid, we would obviously want a greater involvement for something as important as this.
Thanks. Page 110 refers to the occupational health referrals and the fact that they have appeared to have increased following attendance management training. So that's obviously clear that, you know, officers are realising the impact and the need to refer. How effective do you think those referrals are? And are the professionals to which they're referred being able to deal with what I'm guessing is an increased volume of referrals through?
So what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're referring people much earlier to occupational health. And of course, some of these issues are work-related, some of them are personal-related. So we're trying to make sure that we prioritise. But one thing is sure. In terms of the specialism available, for example, for post-traumatic stress disorder, we need to enhance what's available within our occupational health unit. So what we've looked at is what our demand is in terms of counselling provision and, of course, in terms of specialist counselling as well for things such as post-traumatic stress. We're actually managing things really well at the moment, but in terms of future demand, we're going to have to increase what's available.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions on gender ethics? Yeah, Colin?
Firstly, I think we should recognise, you did mention this, Commissioner, the initiative with Headley Bach and the increasing crime prevention panels. The Chief talked about prevention earlier on, and that obviously helps. And I also read the gender pay gap is reducing. So again, that's all good news stuff, isn't it? And I do welcome your assurance that you are still chasing the performance reporting, because, well, it's been a topic of conversation for a long time on the panel, isn't it? To go back to specifics, on page 78, it's to do with knife crime. There are some hugely varying figures. South Wales at the wrong end of with 133 and a 23% change. But I noticed at the bottom of the table, South Yorkshire and Durham have actually, I don't know if they've done something something differently, or whether there's coincidence. Sorry?
They send them all to us in South Wales.
That's what they did. No, do we? I assume that we do. If we see things like that, we do go to those forces to maybe check what they are doing, if they're doing something differently, and helping out.
Absolutely. We look across forces where we've seen some reductions. I think what's important, though, is that all forces actually record knife crime differently as well, which is something that nationally we've had conversations about. The important thing at Gwent Police is of course some of our recovery of knives and having identified crimes where knives have been used are actually in people's residence, in their own private dwellings, where we've attended domestic incidents and knives have been used. That's where we're seeing most of our significant increase. But that's not to say that we're taking our eye off the ball in terms of this trend that's emerging nationally around young people carrying knives. So you may have seen some of our proactive campaigns around Ops Skepta, which is about us being proactive in the communities and literally talking about knife crime and seizing knives and asking people to actually hand their knives over properly. So it's all about prevention, communication with young people, proactive policing, but also making sure that the recording practices are right as well.
Could I just add on that point? I mean, the issue of knife crime and young people has as a national priority. Now, there's no doubt that it's a very, very topical issue. And whilst we don't want to create alarm in communities, it's right that people are alerted to it. One of the positives that may come out of this is a recognition that this isn't just a matter for policing. It's a matter for society as a whole, some of our key partners, and hopefully the message about cuts that there's been in youth provision and youth services will come through to government, and something may be done about it, because those organisations have an incredibly important role to play in changing the attitude of young people, and to make sure that the dangers of carrying a knife, and you are more likely to be attacked by someone with a knife if you're carrying a knife yourself, that is understood. Just to reassure you, with Hedley Bach, we're about to roll out to a further, I think it's 20 schools, something like that. So there'll now be 45 primary schools across Gwent that will benefit from the Hedley Bach scheme. And we're still the only one in Wales, and only about 3 or 4 in England and Wales that are doing this. And there's everyone who goes to visit them, I would encourage every member of the panel to go into the school nearest to you and just find out what they're doing. Those very young children, I mean, the confidence that they demonstrate, their ability to make presentations to people is remarkable. And you'll find that teachers and head teachers are extremely supportive of the scheme. And of course, it supports the curriculum in Wales.
Interesting to see comments if something called Hedley Bach was rolled out in England. And again, some of us would agree with questioning some of the government priorities, but we better leave that one there for the moment. On the force delivery plan, page 151, again, welcome some of the comments on the community cohesion. This comment is probably very ambitious, but it's the bottom of the crime prevention paragraph. It's the first one on the top of there. It impacts on violence without injury statistics due to cyberbullying, etc. I feel that the word physical should be, without physical injury, because there is a huge amount of injury with something like cyberbullying, which is not physical injury. So to actually have a stat which says without injury I think is quite misleading. Whether there's any sort of move to look at something like that, I don't know.
Take your point, absolutely, but it's the Home Office terminology. But I do understand, yes, there can be psychological damage that can be just as damaging as physical damage. I appreciate that. But we are bound by the Home Office terminology.
I do recognise the change in the Home Office is not easy.
Before we wrap up this item, Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Back to knife crime. It's really worried me actually now, because I would read it now. It says there's been a 3.7 increase in bladed implements in schools, and 2 of which have caused injuries. What is you doing to actually undertake work in the school? What are you doing to get your point across to schools?
Well, certainly the school beat, which is the school liaison service that Welsh policing runs jointly with the Welsh Government. That is part of the message that will be imparted when we visit schools. So we are trying to be extremely proactive in helping to change attitudes. And as the Chief has mentioned, we've had some amnesties of knives. But it's, you know, what we can do is limited. It's very much about partnership, working with local authorities, the health boards, a whole range of organisations and third sector organisations that have clear interest and expertise in this area. But it's a very unfortunate sign of the times, but we are as active as we can be. I don't know if there's anything more to add to that.
In particular, I would just point to the work that the Fearless Crime Stoppers work has been doing, particularly in Newport, and that has very much developed a partnership between head teachers and the local neighbourhood policing teams and Crime Stoppers to start to have the conversations and to provide people with confidential advice and support and an avenue they can go to actually be able to talk about some of the professional support.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Before we just wrap up this item then, obviously the plan has now been revised and there are some new measures that will be available. We've spent a lot of time talking about performance and we've spent a lot of time taking it forward. There is an awful lot of information contained within these reports, and the last thing this panel wants to see is a lot of work being, you know, translated from one document to another to another. We want to get to a point where we've got just an effective report that clearly outlines for each of the measures how they're progressing. You referred to the fact that the action plan was instigated at Q3. That, I'm guessing, has had some movement. When are we going to be in a position to be able to understand the new measures, how they're going to be reported against, not necessarily with all the information that sits below it, because there's a lot of time I personally feel being spent trying to answer questions and putting a lot of detail behind something that necessarily isn't at the right level for the panel. We don't want to see a lot of work put into something which maybe with a little bit of tinkering, we get something right, then you start to develop the sets of information below it.
I mean, I can assure you that work is in hand. I referred to it with temporary Deputy Chief Constable John Edwards. I know he's done work particularly with O'Leary and with Joe Robinson. Is there anything you want to add?
You know, we're at the point of wanting to come back and share that with the subgroup, because I think that, just to provide that reassurance that the work that is being developed in relation to the new performance framework is the performance framework that Gwent Police itself is determining is the performance it requires, the framework it requires in order for it to assure itself on the delivery against police and crime plan. So we are designing all of this very much to avoid duplication and to focus on improving performance and effectiveness.
So that's recognised. There's going to be there's going to be data that you use on an operational level to confirm your position against the plan, which actually is going to be at too detailed a level for something that you would need to bring to the police and crime panel. So when can we sort of expect to see something around the new plan? Is that something that's likely to come to September's meeting, or something that can be shared with the performance subgroup before then?
I think we're intending to share it. It's imminent, and we're looking to share that with the subgroup. I'm not sure we had intended to bring it back to the full panel in September, given the detail of this discussion, but I think we will be imminently sharing that with yourselves.
Yeah, I think to emphasise I suppose the magnitude of the work, but that leads to what was required, which is a massive cultural change around the whole reporting, and then it all follows through from the point of operational policing right through to the strategic reporting. And what we hope to do with the performance group is to be able to tweak some of those things then that are reporting for the police and crime plan. So there will be an opportunity, and I would suggest in September for the performance group, if not before, to be able to look at all of the things that are in progress at the moment, and then be able to provide comment to that, so that then you're reassured that what you have at that very high level is actually supported by more detailed information underneath. So then you would have that reassurance, and when we're talking about things in those ways in the panel, that you understand that that's where that's coming from and that it has those roots.
That's great. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Get this mic going. On page 164, it talks about community resolutions. There does seem to have been a drop in certainly in the total. And I think we'd all agree that community resolutions are probably a good way of dealing with things. A little bit worrying to see that there has actually been a drop in that section.
Yes, I take a point. This is a matter that's been raised at the Strategy and Performance Board. I mean, the community resolution really depends on the nature of the offence and the willingness of people to engage, both in terms of the perpetrator and the victim. I think if we could, we'll take that point back and perhaps come up with further explanations.
Community resolution training is actually taking place as well with some of our new younger officers that have just joined us. So in terms of training, scrutiny, and also raising awareness of the use of community resolution is work that is ongoing. We've actually appointed somebody to look at this for us because we see it as an issue that we need to develop on. So certainly you've picked up an area that we feel needs improvement.
Thank you very much. So thank you for your time and investment in those questions on that item. The next item now then is item number 7, the Draft Police and Crime Plan Annual Report. Would you like to introduce this, Commissioner?
Yes.
So, sorry, Commissioner, could you turn the microphone on, please? Sorry.
Do I need to start again? Sorry? Oh, fortunately, it's quick, so I'll do it again. The report before you details the activity that my team and I have undertaken in delivering against the Police and Crime Plan in 2018-19. I would like to stress that this is a draft version of the report and further amendments will be made before publication. It's included in the agenda today to provide members of the panel with an opportunity to review the document in its draft form. And as you can see, my formal views are yet to be added to the report. These will be captured in my introduction and concluding remarks. I welcome any feedback you may wish to offer and will consider it before publishing the final version of the report. All I would ask is that, unless points are made now, can all comments be provided within 2 weeks of this meeting so that they can be given full consideration before the report is published. I believe that the draft demonstrates that I have effectively delivered against the Police and Crime Plan for 2018-19. I'm particularly pleased with the improvements that I have driven to increase engagement across all communities in Gwent and strengthen support for vulnerable victims of crime. I think they are significant achievements. This document has been written with the public in mind so that it can be attractive to read and be meaningful. And I'm confident that going forward, we'll build on those successes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Councillor Mike Jeremiah, you had a particular point? Yeah, okay. Colin?
Too many pages in this document. Yeah, I think we've covered it to a large extent. You mentioned on the Priority 5 Commissioner that held the Chief Constable to account for the delivery and so on. Well, I think we all agree that you need more information to, to do let's say, a more efficient job of actually holding the Chief to account, because obviously without the figures that the Chair has been chasing for a long time, I think it's probably difficult for you to do that in the way that you would want to, really.
It's, well, thank you for that. I mean, I think I can say that, and I take absolutely the point that the Chief made during her session, we have different functions, and we understand those differences and where the demarcation lines are. However, in terms of my relationship with Gwent Police, I see myself and my office more as a critical friend, that what we're focused on ultimately is the quality of service to the people of Gwent that we can very often provide together by being critical friends, and holding to account is a process that I believe to be productive and positive, and produces better outcomes through a process of scrutiny. But yeah, we can always do better. We'll never get to the point where, or shouldn't get to the point where we can just lean back and say, oh, that's everything sorted. There'll always be new issues coming up. I alluded to some of them in the previous agenda account. We need to sit down and now say, how will the stop and search new rules? How will it work with the communities within Gwent? Who have we got to engage with? If we are going to have 200 more officers in Gwent, how are they to be allocated? So there's always these changes, and of course the new education and qualification framework. So it's a constant process of the relationship developing and understanding what's best for the public service in Gwent. But I take your point.
Councillor Eason?
Yes, thank you, Chair. A compliment. Your team were at the Caldecott 999 day last summer, suitably attired. I think they'll need walkthroughs this weekend, mind if they come this weekend. But the real question, the question I want to ask is, in 1819 you had 450 police probationers and 150 special constables. How many police left in that period of time from the 450 that went in, and how many went out?
I think we'll need to come back on those figures to you.
I take it it relates to this sort of 3 to 2 bit, I suppose, at the end of the day, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, yes, if you would. Yeah. But I am very pleased to hear about the presence suitably attired. This was. Oh, there's no cowboys working in my office. I can. At least I hope not. But I was a little concerned, because isn't it this weekend as well? Yes. Ah, right, because I intend to be there on that one.
Yeah,
yes.
It's this Sunday.
Right.
Having read the annual plan, I mean, one of the requirements for the annual plan is it to clearly report upon the progress that's been made in meeting the objectives of the overall plan. And I just think some of the actions could be developed to be a bit stronger. For example, under Priority 1 crime prevention, you refer to ensuring people feel safe, less affected by crime and brought to justice quickly. The update refers to focusing on crimes, making use of cash and developing plans and addressing critical issues. I mean, the last 2 years we've talked about how crime is increasing, youth offenders remaining consistent. There's an increase in knife crimes. And, it's about being appropriate in terms of the information that's included in the annual plan. The measures are quite strong, and I just feel that the actions that are being put forward to suggest those measures have been delivered could do with a bit more strengthening and beefing up. When it comes to priority 2, supporting victims, you refer to continuing work with partners, yet we've talked about here, and the information we've received shows that victim satisfaction is reducing. I know nobody wants to put in an annual report the fact that victim satisfaction is reducing, but this whole report is talking about, the annual report should be talking about how we're actually delivering against those measures, and I think it could do with some strengthening to illustrate how those measures are being achieved. The report spends a lot of time covering the elements of actions undertaken by the PCC's office, and in particular Gwent Police and its partner agencies. There's good work that's happening out there, we know that, but I think the focus of this report needs to be how your measures are being delivered. You know, we talk about developing plans, we're talking about continuing to work with partners. We need something more tangible than that, I think, to take it forward. I've had a quick look. Authorities such as Thames Valley and Surrey, you know, I think they do some good work around illustrating in their annual reports how things are improving. Not lots and lots of data, but sometimes there's just a one-pager that picks up their key measures and their key outcomes against their self-set measures, which gives residents a good idea of how the Police and Crime Commissioner is performing. So that's just a reference point. I don't know if you wish to have any commentary on that.
Well, I note your comments, Chair, and will certainly look at that. So thank you. Yes?
Just to provide some more reassurances, I think, to the panel. So the office itself, we're just finalising a business plan that will take us over the next 2 years. And one of the things that we think would be really useful to pull out, and it'll help, obviously, to show in the annual report where we've complied with the priorities, but how so much what the office does is statutory functions and enabling works in order to create the conditions for the police and partners to be able to deliver. So we think that would be a useful way to present it perhaps in future, rather than entirely that the work of this office only works to deliver the priorities. Obviously, everything we do helps to do that, but we just think that in future that would be a better way to demonstrate it for you, is to work under those objectives and to be clear that those are the 3 strands of the things that we do, not only work towards the priorities themselves.
Thanks very much, Sean. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. You've covered a lot of the stuff that I was just about to bring up, so I thank you for that. What I do struggle with is the very essence that this is your draft report, and yet you bring it to me to scrutinise your draft report, help you present it. So when it comes back as your report, I'm merely rubber stamping something I've already gone through and helped you to devise. I really would like you to take this away. You understand, and I know you do. You get it. You understand. You understand where this police and crime panel is coming from. You understand the questions that we've asked over the period of time, and I do believe that this is your report. It will be scrutinised by us in its final. I don't think that we should be leading the report at all. I know that but I just find it difficult.
Just to clarify the report, this is our opportunity to comment on the report, but it doesn't come back to us. It is the Commissioner's report.
I'll leave it there for now.
Any further comments? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, Commissioner, for bringing that to the meeting and for taking on board the comments today. Next item on the agenda then is number 8, which is the Forward Work Programme.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to bring members' attention to the next meeting, which is on the 27th September 2019, which is on page 239 of your packs. You see we've got a number of items there, some of which were deferred from the planned meeting today in order to make room for the confirmation hearing. I would like to suggest, in view of the fact that we've got a detailed performance report today, perhaps if we have a short performance report update for information only at the next meeting, so it doesn't actually on the agenda, so it just gives members an update in terms of the progress, in terms of developing the framework. And then the rest of the items will be as they are. There will be a presentation on absence management to take on board some of the feedback from the panel. The next meeting's on the 13th of December, then at 10 a.m. And then also updating members at the meeting in the new year on the 31st of January to consider the precept. So just remember to mark that in their diaries.
Councillor Eason?
Yeah, could I make one comment about the performance report? There's a lot of repetition in it. You're reading through it. I've been there before. What was it all about? And we found that this morning where questions have been asked based on one specific aspect, but they have been referred to earlier with the answer in some respects. So is it possible that these reports could be in a more concise manner, that we got the item there once, not 2 or 3 times?
Yeah, we are, that's part of the plan in terms of taking it forward. So because it's very much part of the year-end report, the Police and Crime Commission has helpfully sort of given us the different strands to bring together, but that's what the performance subgroup will be working with the Commissioner to deliver, is something that's effective for us to understand the measures, not necessarily the operations, unless we want to understand, like, dive into a particular area.
I don't know, it's all over the shop today. Is to offer members the opportunity for a deep dive on a day in the life of policing. This is something that we've offered MPs and AMs to sample policing and to hear more about the work of a typical day in policing. And we're wondering if you would like to take up that offer, and in which case we'd try and put a programme together.
Okay, thank you for that offer. There's definitely interest in that. So we've now come to the end of the agenda. So once again, I'd like to congratulate Pam Kelly on her appointment as Chief Constable. As a panel, we're very much looking forward to working with yourselves and the Commissioner going forward. Again, our thanks to Councillor John Guy for all the work that he's done as the chair of this committee. I'll make sure those wishes are passed on. And as I said, there is a card circulated and a collection if anybody would like to donate. And with that, no further issues, then the meeting is now closed. Thank you very much.